The black asphalt wound through the thick trees like a serpent. The path was so twisted and aimless that it seemed to be losing its way in the dense forest. "So, this is New York, eh?" I joked. "Exactly what I expected." My wife laughed, absent-mindedly searching for a radio station that actually worked. "There's more to New York than just New York City," she laughed. "Crazy, right?" I watched the road intently, gripping my hands on the wheel and watching the black trees rush past. I could barely take my eyes off the road for a second without nearly smashing into a trunk. The road didn't carve through the forest. Rather, the trees seemed to be dictating where we could go. I swear the road even doubled back on itself once or twice. "Just give it up already," I laughed, glancing at my wife. "You've been trying for the past 20 minutes now." "There's got to be at least one station that gets something," she said, slightly flustered. "You sure your radio's even working?" "It was working before we turned off the highway," I reminded her. "I don't think it would have just broken all of a sudden." "But isn't it a little strange?" she said, giving up and slumping into her seat. "You know, for the radio to do that?" "Not really," I replied. "I would be more surprised if we actually did get a signal in here, to be honest." "No," she said. "I mean, shouldn't it at least be playing static? Is it normal for it to just go dead silent like this?" I thought for a minute. I didn't really know a whole lot about how radios worked, but that did seem a little strange. "I don't know," I shrugged. "Maybe it is broken." I barely caught myself and jerked the car back onto the road as a mangled branch screeched across the car. "Jesus!" my wife cried, grabbing her armrest. "Watch the road!" "I am," I replied. "Well then slow down!" she gasped, flinching as the path took another absurdly sharp turn. "Your mom is going to kill us if we're any later," I replied, grudgingly slowing down despite my words. "Not if you kill us first," my wife breathed, pressing her face against the glass of her window, peering out at the car. I think that last branch scratched the paint. I groaned slightly, but then smiled, saying, "Well, now we can use that as a guilt trip if your mom yells at us for not being on time." My wife chuckled and sat back in her seat, drumming her fingers on her armrest. The path suddenly took another sharp turn, and as I spun the wheel and came careening around the corner, I barely had time to smash my foot against the brake pedal. Just around the bend, now directly in front of us, was a black car. It was parked in the middle of the road, skewed at an angle with all of its lights off. Both me and my wife groaned in pain after my abrupt stop. I barely avoided smashing into the skewed vehicle, only inches between our two cars. I glanced up with bleary eyes, my neck hurting like all hell. It didn't look as if there was anyone inside, and yet the keys were in the ignition. I put our car into park groggily, enraged that someone had stopped on a road with such limited visibility. My wife was rubbing her head and neck, more angry than I was at whoever had just left their car. She cursed and threw her door open, nearly forgetting to take her seatbelt off in her rage. She staggered out onto the pavement as I slowly closed my own door and walked to the parked car. I gazed in through the driver's window, placing my hand against the glass and leaning in close to see inside. My wife walked slightly further down the road, looking to see if anyone was standing outside. "Jenny?" I stammered uneasily. "You see anyone?" "No," she replied. "So there isn't anyone inside?" "No," I said slowly. "Jenny, there hasn't been. In a very long time." She looked back at me, her face angry, rolling her eyes. She slowly walked towards me from down the dark road, flinging her hands up in the air. "Well, what the hell?" she cried. "Who the hell does that?" "I don't think you understand," I said, hesitantly opening the driver's side door. I stepped aside and let Jenny look in as she stopped beside me. Those are, she stammered. Spider webs? Yeah, I said, peeking my head inside and looking around some more. They're everywhere. There's leaves and pine needles all along the floor as well. It seems like this car hasn't been used in a while. Tom, Jenny said, nervously glancing into the forest. The keys are in the ignition, aren't they? I nodded slowly. It should be running, but it's out of gas. We looked at each other, and then back at our own car sitting stagnant on the road, its engine humming softly. I could tell we were both getting more than just a little uneasy. So, I started, I guess we should move this car then, right? Just to the side of the road. I mean, the door's open, I could just hop inside. Jenny looked at me and nodded slowly, clearly starting to seriously worry. I brushed the cobwebs away from the driver's seat and reluctantly sat down, getting several webs in my mouth despite my best efforts. I clawed at my face and spat the sticky strands out, shaking my head violently. Finally free of the webs, I gave a nervous chuckle to Jenny, who stood outside the car. I placed my foot on the brake and shifted the car into neutral. It rolled forward slowly. I began guiding it off the road. I glanced in the rearview mirror and suddenly couldn't breathe. My arms flailed in horror and I jerked the door open, falling out onto the pavement, rolling several times on the cold, wet asphalt. The car continued onwards without me, rolling off the road and careening into a nearby tree, making a solid crunch before stopping. The tree shook lightly, its twisted, blackened limbs shuddering with the impact. "What?" Jenny cried, running to me. "Tom, what the hell is wrong?" I had already scrambled to my feet and was backing away from the car. Jenny just grabbed onto me, trying to get me to calm down. "Hey, Tom," she husked. "Tom, tell me what happened." I looked at her, my face contorted in terror. "There was a child," I whispered, my throat dry. Jenny looked at me, concern filling her face as she glanced back at the car. It was under the back seat." I shuddered, unable to keep my limbs from shaking. Jenny just looked at the car in horror. "Under the back seat?" she breathed. I looked at her with unblinking eyes and nodded. "Tom," she continued, "was it, Yes," I finished for her, fighting to keep my stomach down. "It was dead." I choked down vomit and tried several times to speak again before finally finding the words. It was strapped in its seatbelt and booster seat. I think it tried to wiggle its way out, but was unable to get free. It just fell down to the floor." Jenny swallowed hard and shuddered again. I tried to continue. "It's been there for a long time. It was starting to decay." "Stop!" Jenny cried, covering her ears, flinching away from the black car that now lay pinned against a tree. "Who the fuck would... What the hell is going on here?" "I don't know," I uselessly croaked out. "We need to call the police." Suddenly, Jenny's phone rang. She shuffled it out of her pocket and looked at the screen. She answered it quickly and held it up to her ear. "Mom," she said, "I'm sorry, but I really can't talk now." She was panicked and pale as she talked, unable to tear her wide eyes away from the car. Slowly, however, she began to relax, and her gaze slipped to the ground, her eyes appearing distant and faint. The terror in them was replaced by a sort of cloudy sludge. "Jenny," I asked. What's going on? Tell her you can't talk right now. After a brief silence, her voice slowly crept out into the air like someone half asleep. She wants me to put her on speakerphone. Okay, I stammered. That's fine, but why are you... I suddenly stopped as Jenny clicked the speaker button and her mom's voice cut into my head. What a nice lady, I thought. She was always right about everything. Yes, it is a nice day to walk the road rather than drive, I thought. No, it wasn't strange that as we walked, we began to pass more and more cars parked along the side of the road, I thought. Did we make sure our son was buckled up safely in the booster seat of our car? Of course, I thought. After all, you're the one who told us to bring him along.